G'day and welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to do a video on muzzle brakes, or muzzle brake threads actually, but it's inspired by a little bit of what I've seen online, a little bit of what I'm talking to people about, and something that I think that it's worthwhile putting some thought into. In front of me I've got a couple of rifles that we've shot just recently, and they're probably pretty good case examples to go through and explain what I'm talking about. You're just about to watch another one of our info videos, something that we're very proud to bring to the shooting community through our channel. Done something to try and grow knowledge, to try and put my perspective on things and try and help people, make you more accurate, get you more knowledgeable on the subject of shooting, and in general trying to grow the community. But because we are what we are, we're not a sensationalist thing, we're not doing videos for kids, we are showing extreme long range shooting and how to make things better, puts us very much offside with the other side of the world, which is where YouTube largely exists. That means that even when you do see ads on our channel, we get very, very little for it. And yes, I know, I see them too, YouTubers that make literally millions of dollars a year out of making videos. We are the stark contrast to that. If our video does really well, it might make $50, maybe even $100 on some really rare ones. But largely we make $10 to $20 to $30 is what we make. That's Australian dollars. So very, very poor in the way of the financial side of things. But listen, hey, that's the nature of the world we live in. What I want to put forward is there is ways to support us, and we very, very much appreciate any support that we get. If you go to our web store, there is links, there are different things there, from support bricks to club membership. The end of the day, if you are able to support us, and only if it's something you want to do and are capable of doing, we hugely appreciate it. Anyway, that's where I want to leave it. Get back to the video. I hope you enjoy. The one in the front is a little Manners stock custom build 10 years ago. This is a 243 that we just went through the process of shortening the barrel. Had a very long barrel with no muzzle brake, and we shortened the barrel and set this thing up, and really found interestingly actually it got a speed increase, and there's some details to go into that, which would be about the fact that the barrel was actually too long for where it was starting to slow the bullet back down again, would be the summation of that. But that's not what this video is about, but that's what it's done with. Both of these have got our muzzle brakes on it. This other one is the 378 Weatherby Magnum, this big fella here, which is set up custom to do what we wanted to do. And both shot really well. This one's just shot at 3,000. It's made to shoot even further than that. This one here we just shot at just under a mile, but it was really a test. It's going to go back to its owner now, but it was just really a test to make it all shoot as well as we could and try and make it a little more practical to use. But in that process, we had to thread the muzzle brake, and I'll knock that off. By the way, this is the spanner I tend to use for my muzzle brakes. It's a very simple thing to remove them, being nice and square, and a little tap on the side there. That's about the tension they're done up to. Not great tension, but threaded on, and this is what this muzzle thread looks like. Very standard, almost standard, and close enough to a factory thread. There we go. To use it. It's actually a 1x18 thread this one's done at, and generally you're going to have a very similar thread in the 5/8x24. For people that don't know what that means, one's a metric thread, one's an imperial thread. In a 1x18 means a 1mm pitch by an 18mm diameter. 5/8x24 means a 5/8 of an inch diameter with a 24 TPI, 24 threads per inch. Very standard threads. The 5/8x24 would be the most standard thread, and looks pretty much like that. Now this is a barrel that has a 21mm muzzle on it, and then it's been taken down to an 18mm thread. And like I said, most commonly it would be a 5/8, which is a 5/8 inch thread, which is around a 16mm thread. Now in this, it's a 243, so that's very appropriate and very much a factory thing. So this is what I wanted to get into, what I'm actually talking about. We now live in a place where, in trying to get more accuracy, you all know that your heavier barrel is going to be more accurate. We go into load development, even tuning. So there's muzzle tuners and brake tuners and things like that to tune the harmonics, to try and control the harmonics. I've been through how I do things to try and set up the rifle and make the human, the body, absorb harmonics and make them shoot better. I don't use tuners because of the way I do things, but there is places where the tuners do have real merits, but it comes down to all this work about this shock in the barrel. And that's what the harmonics are. It's that shock transferring up and down the barrel and creating vibrations that turn into harmonics and all the rest of it. But a bit I don't see much difference, or what I am still seeing, is the thread and the muzzle brake is really sort of just a bit of screw on the end of it. Now I would sort of think about this a little bit different, or put something to consider. All that shock comes up here, and we're talking about what happens at the muzzle. Keep in mind that another thing that's happening in the muzzle, with the muzzle brake on there, there's another proper hammer crack happening just as the bullet's leaving also. Now that's doing two things. One, how you clamp up, how that mating surface clamps up and that sort of stuff. You want to make sure that doesn't need to be overloaded or anything, but it does need to be where it isn't creating an extra vibration as that shock happens at the end there. Your thread size is the bit that I'm getting into for two reasons. One is you have to understand there's a hammer shock happening at the end there. So the smaller that the thread route, well actually the changeover from where the thread's coupled up to, there's that flange point right there, which is where you essentially have one piece pulling on another piece. The bit in the middle there, the bit between those two, which is right at the beginning of this thread, where this is rebaited, that is the bit that is going to some degree or another, do a little tiny expansion as it moves through. Yes, a little expansion. It's steel, but steel, you really have to think about steel as an extremely viscous fluid. When steel's under enough pressure, it moves like a fluid. So that's what's happening to some degree or another when it goes bang. Now the smaller the thread, steel works like most things, the more of it, the stronger it is. So the less of it, the weaker it is. The bigger thing I'd want you to consider is what's actually happening inside here is there's your rifling and a bullet that's running down them. Now if you think of your rifling like a set of railway tracks, there's a set of tracks, a set of guides that your bullet has cut into and then is rolling down and following down the bullet. So the same reason I'm not a big fan of the gain twist is I really like the concept of the bullet gets onto them and then it slowly, or not slowly, it very quickly, but it gains speed gradually, even though it's only milliseconds we're talking about. It's still gaining in speed, but it's sitting in this same set of tracks and running right to the end of the barrel. With a gain twist, that's changing, so it's cutting in more and there's different things going on. That's one of the things I don't like about it, the concept of a gain twist. But the bigger thing I'm talking about right now is if I've got this little tiny expansion happening right at the end, where there's a little tiny bit of growth happening right at the end, and I've got my bullet sitting on a nice set of tracks, it's heading out smoothly, and just right before it gets out the end there's a little tiny wriggle where those tracks actually, if you can imagine, you've got your rifling coming out and at one place it stretches. So it means what actually happens at one place, that track deviates and then deviates back again. Just for an instant, but whereafter we've gone to all this work to get everything smooth, to try and absorb every harmonics, to try and tune the barrel to suit all those things, and then we're going to allow that little wriggle at the end there. To me, that's not something that I think is a good idea. So, yes, there's a lot of muzzle brakes that are cut in the smaller threads. Yes, there's a lot of factory rifles that are cut in the smaller thread. But the smaller thread with the larger barrel, and especially in a larger caliber, has some real fundamental engineering issues with it. It really, the truth of why there's always all these small threads is because people have a rifle they can buy, they're all small threads. And I suppose a little bit of what I'm fighting, I suppose, is that the industry builds a lot of rifles with smaller threads in all sorts of stuff, 3-thread Lapurs with small threads. The reason they do that is they do what people buy, what people have got, what people will buy, what is easier to do things with. They build what people want to buy. People buy what they go and purchase what the companies sell. So the two things are chasing each other. You've got a little bit of a vicious circle happening on its own entity, happening on its own thing. It's justifying itself. In a practical sense, I look at the fact of that same thing. I fight with the more power, the more bang that's happening in the end, and that's what actually happens. If you've got more gas, and it's the gas we're talking about, more gas pushing, there's more hit up the front here. So the more power we're talking about, the bigger the thread I want. In truth, I could really go with the bigger barrel just to make the size difference the same. So the bigger barrel, the bigger thread. That would be the where I would go and where I'd head. And I suppose what I'm saying is both because of the nature of how we buy things. Someone buys a rifle and they get a custom rifle built. They tend to be, and the more I'm finding out, they tend to be threading to a muzzle brake they've already got, or a muzzle brake they've already used, or one that they can see they can buy. And the manufacturers are making muzzle brakes to suit factory rifles, and the factory rifles are set up with the smaller threads because that's what muzzle brakes people have got, yada, yada, yada. Like I said, vicious circle. So my suggestion is in a custom rifle, work out how to get larger threads. Also, my suggestion would be is that actually recutting a thread in a muzzle brake that you already have isn't that complicated if you look at the whole process of it. And in the way of trying to iron out all those little dots, all those little things and make it really good. So you've done all the rest of it, and that's including tuners, or that's all the load development, or all the rest you've done with your chassis, then this bit here is just as important. The reason I've got this one here behind here, this is one of my muzzle brakes. It's one of the large thread muzzle brakes. This is a 1x14 thread. And this is what this looks like. This is in the world of practice what you preach. Well, that's what I practice. Exactly that. 1 inch, and that's a 1 inch thread. Actually, no, this one's a 28 mil thread. 28 by 1.5 is what this one is. Sorry, I've got a few different ones, and this one's the 28 millimeter thread, so 1.1 inches. So giant thread. The truth of it is, why does it need to be smaller? It's simply a case of getting a muzzle brake made to suit, or modifying your muzzle brake, but a muzzle brake that suits, and then go larger. There is absolutely no negatives to this system. It has a nice big lock-up flange. It works well in what it does. But like I said, in the way of practicing what I preach, the reason I've done it this way is there's a lot of power in this system. So does it need to be that size thread to hold it? No, it doesn't. You could come down engineering wise, but there's absolutely no negatives. And in the logic of different sizes, amount of power, and how much flex and all that sort of stuff, this I can only see as a positive thing. Can I prove any positives over shooting with smaller threads? I couldn't honestly say that. I've not done it. The smallest I've shot with is the 1x18 on a 338 Lapua, which is what's on my 300 Win Mag. It's what came on my Seiko TRG with a 338. But the moment I figured this out, I stepped things up. There is a couple of manufacturers that are going there. I think the Ruger Precision have gone with a 3/4 by 24 TPI thread. So it's a nice step up. It's heading in the right direction. And my suggestion would be really it's for the people getting a custom rifle made, a custom barrel made, I should say, is to consider going with a larger thread. Even if your muzzle brakes are the ones you've used are all these smaller ones, consider going with a larger thread. There is really some sound engineering logic to go with this. In the practical purposes, I suppose there is a business logic to go with this too. The more people asking for larger muzzle brakes, the more people look at larger muzzle brakes, the more manufacturers are going to follow with larger muzzle brakes. And then really, I think the ideal world would be going down to where you don't have any more than 1/8 of an inch drop from barrel size to muzzle thread. So whatever your barrel size is, whatever that muzzle size is what determines your muzzle thread. Rather than your caliber, you go with a heavier barrel, you go with a larger thread. So that obviously can get problematic in how many you have, but you probably only need 3 threads amongst there. There's all these other choices in there. It's not too complicated, but I suppose it's a point that I really wanted to come back to the engineering of it. If you think about your bullet being on a set of tracks, and you think about the fact that Steel isn't a solid. Steel is something that's actually moving. That's what we're talking about with harmonics. That's what we're talking about with pressure and, like I said, the fluid side of that. And then you look at a sudden drop and going down to small. I've seen too many of this size barrel with a 5/8x24 or even a 1/18 thread or a 3/4 thread on a big barrel, and I really look at it and go, well, okay, it's probably okay, but what's wrong with the engineering of stepping up to the next level and going with a larger thread? So, and yes, I do have them, that I've made them, and I haven't looked to see if other manufacturers are doing it. My suggestion is, engineeringly wise, it's a sound idea, and I see no negatives to it. Anyway, that's about what I can tell you. That's what I was trying to show you. Both of these shot really well. The like I said, the interesting feature with going faster with a shorter barrel that this one did was interesting to run into. I wasn't expecting it, to be truthful, but I was seeing some inconsistencies in some of the bullets in extreme long range when I shot this, well, not extreme, at 1200 yards. There was some inconsistencies out there which hadn't shown up at all in the 600 and 800 yard shooting it was used for, but I did run into that, and I thought, listen, it's a really long barrel, why not we tweak it, see what we do. It's going to have a different job, might lose a little bit of speed. We didn't lose any speed at all. Very interesting to run into that. My logic to go with it is that at 31.5-inch barrel that this was, really it would suggest that probably the last 4 inches were not using the powder anymore. That's with a couple of different choices of powders and a couple of different load developments. It was all about the same and about 100 feet per second slower. So it would suggest that it was starting to slow the bullet back down again, and I think it was starting to, for the long stuff, deform the cases enough to where it was changing the BC on the bullet. So there was a little bit of inconsistency. Not really sure on that. What I am sure is, come back to 26 inches, it did gain speed. That was a surprise. Its consistency was really good. And yeah, the 243 is a great cartridge. That was probably the only other interesting feature, is it actually had a little bit more speed than the 6mm Creedmoor, which I wasn't expecting that. There's some other details going on. And listen, I'd have to do more testing to figure it all out. But like I said, great cartridge. Anyway, that's enough for me banging on. Consider your muzzle brake size. I think it's a very valuable thing to engineer into it. And I suppose my follow through with that sort of stuff is I find great consistency and real accuracy, and I don't do so much of the load development or the barrel tuning, the things that so many people do. So a little bit of my question is, where are these other details? You know, my muzzle brake was designed for a particular thing in the way of its blowing gas to the side, but is there something else in these things? We certainly get very good reviews or very good feedback from people as to how they shoot. Weren't designed down that road, but what is this other feature that I see? I don't believe I'm a different shooter. I believe it's in the setup, and these might be some of the clues. Anyway, that's food for thought. Thanks for checking in on us, guys. Hope you enjoyed. We'll catch you next time.